What is going on, everyone? Today we're going to be ranking every single Call of Duty Zombies game mode that has ever released. And when I say game mode, I mean a specific way to play zombies. As an example, Outbreak would be a game mode, Grief would be a game mode, Onslaught would be a game mode. These are different ways to play Call of Duty Zombies, and we're going to be ranking all 14 of them. And yes, this is including the non-Treyarch Call of Duty games. The only modes I am not including are any modes that were limited time. So if it is not currently available in the game, I am not including that. There was a couple modes added to Cold War that were limited time, such as Jingle Hells. Did not include those because, like I said, they were limited time. So without further ado, let's just get right to it. In the number 14 spot is going to be Nightmares from Black Ops 3. So honestly, this was the one mode I considered if I shouldn't even include it or not, because it doesn't really feel like a zombies mode. It's more of an experience attached to the campaign. And if you guys don't know what Nightmares from Black Ops 3 is, it's essentially a whole nother way to play through the Black Ops 3 campaign. But instead of fighting against AI soldiers that you normally would in the campaign, you fight against zombies. It's nearly identical to the Black Ops 3 campaign missions, so if you already played the campaign, there's really no point of playing this mode, aside from a couple of new storyline tidbits they give you, but it really doesn't matter whatsoever to the main zombies universe with the Ether story. It's kind of its own thing within the Black Ops 3 campaign universe, and it's really just not interesting, I'll be honest. I played through most of the missions. I didn't even complete it because, like I said, what's the point, really? And it's not very good. I mean, the campaign itself is already bad in and of itself. And so just switching that out with zombies, there's really no point to this. I really wish the devs just didn't even bother with this mode and instead just added more to the zombies experience, or added more to the campaign, or even the multiplayer, wherever. They should have put their resources elsewhere, because this is one of the most wasteful uses of resources I have ever seen on a game mode in Call of Duty history. This mode has no importance to it. There's no reason to play it. It's a waste of time. In number 13 spot, I've got Duran Fong and Terra Maldicta, and I didn't really know what to call this version of zombies because it's obviously not the same as traditional round-based, and it's also not really similar to any other mode we've ever seen, so I'm just kind of calling it its own thing. And it's essentially like a mix of Outbreak, Onslaught, and even some parts of the Tortured Path from World War II. And I just don't think it worked at all. There's a reason why so many people hated Vanguard when it first came out, and a big part of it was how this new version of zombies played. It's taking all the wrong elements from those modes I mentioned. It's not even taking the good parts of Outbreak or Onslaught. It's just reusing multiplayer maps and a couple other locations from the campaign, throwing it into this really just jumbled experience that has really no personality when you really think about it, because most of the locations that are within these maps don't really connect all that well. They just feel like random locations thrown together with portals, and then you have these objectives that you're forced to do each time you want to progress around. Now, they did add this whole void objective thing that kind of made it into a round-based thing where you can just go into the void and just, go through rounds there, but it really wasn't that enjoyable, to be honest. It didn't have that same flow as traditional round-based did, so it just felt like a complete waste of time for me. And obviously, the maps themselves were pretty bad. Maybe if we got really good maps within this mode, it could have been better. I just don't think there was ever going to be a world where it was going to work 100%. It just felt like such a waste of resources, just like Nightmares did. They could have just made a regular map, and I think it would have gone over way better. In the number 12 spot, I've got Turned from Black Ops 2, and Turned is an interesting mode because I've definitely had fun on it before with friends. I think you can enjoy yourself here and there, but it's one of those modes that you play it a couple times and you're probably never going to care to play it again. I can definitely see them returning this and maybe making it somewhat interesting in the future, but honestly, it just plays like a really weird version of Infected from multiplayer. I would much rather play Infected instead of Turned, if I'm going to be completely honest. It was also only available on 2 maps. You can play it on Diner as well as Buried, which didn't really make sense to me because you had a bunch of other maps that you could have utilized this mode for. You could have put it on Town, you could have put it on Bus Depot, you could have put it even on Farm, and maybe even Nuketown, and just a couple other maps you definitely could have put it on, but instead it was only on those 2 maps. And like I said, it got kind of boring rather quickly. There really wasn't much to it. The way the mode works is that only one person at a time is human and everyone else in the lobby is a zombie, and essentially they have to just go or run after that human and try to kill them. And when they kill them, that person then turns into a human and now has to defend themselves against all these other zombies. And they switch between guns every time they get a kill. So basically it's like gun game in that way, where every time you get a kill, you switch guns to a different gun, and the goal is basically just get as many kills as you can, right? And then after I think it's 6 minutes or something is up, once the match is done, whoever gets the most kills in the end is crowned as the winner of that game. And yeah, you can have fun, sure, but when there's not much more to it than that, it becomes this boring mode that you don't really care to play more in the future. In number 11 spot, I've got the Tortured Path mode from Call of Duty World War II. And interestingly enough, everyone usually counts the Tortured Path as a map. Whenever they talk about, ranking all the Call of Duty maps, they usually include the Tortured Path as a map, but it's not a map, it's a mode with 3 maps within it, and you could also use those 3 maps just to play regular survival as well. So I don't really understand why everyone always calls this a singular map, because it's really not. It's the mode where, yes, you have 10 different rounds on each of these maps, and you go through each of the rounds, and there's like objectives on some of the rounds there's no objectives, and you can do Easter eggs on them as well, but you don't have to. They're just, optional Easter eggs, just like they've always been before. And there's always a boss fight at that 10th round where you have to take on a little boss. It's usually not anything too crazy, but it's still just there. And I don't think this mode's like terrible. A lot of people absolutely hate it. I don't really think it's good either. It's kind of like the first thing of objective-based zombies we've ever seen, because now we have a lot of objective-based zombies today. But this is the first time where we actually got to see it where like the only way to progress around was doing an objective. And the objectives weren't that crazy. Like they really weren't that hard usually. So I never really had a problem with it. I never thought it was that awful. I just had a problem with this replacing a new round-based map. It was DLC 3. If this was like an extra bonus thing, that would be different, but it was DLC 3. We wanted a new round-based map, and so seeing this was kind of like, it wasn't that crazy to me. But I have had fun on this time to time. I think the boss fights at the end, except for the second map, the USS Mount Olympus map, that boss fight is terrible. You can defeat it in like 2 seconds. It's not really much of a boss fight. But the Altar of Blood boss fight on the third map is actually really good. It's actually one of the best bosses in that game, I would say. It's actually quite difficult. And the first boss is just against a Brenner. Pretty easy, but it's still there at least as something you can do in this game. And I think it's better than the modes we talked about before, but I still think it has its issues where I don't really care to play it that often just because, it's not like the type of zombies I enjoy. There's not many options you have there. When you go into this mode, you pretty much do the same thing every single time you play it, and that's not good game design in my opinion. In number 10 spot, I've got Cranked from Black Ops Cold War. Now, to be specific, this is Cranked 2. For some reason, that's the only version of Cranked that actually stayed in the game, and the first version of Cranked was just removed forever. I have no idea why. I don't really understand what the differences were, because to be honest, I didn't really play Cranked 1 all that much, but I played a bit of Cranked 2, and the way I feel about this mode is kind of weird because I don't think it's a bad mode or anything. I just don't see the point of it. Like, why would I ever choose to play this over just regular zombies? And it is also only available on D Machine and Firebase Z. For some reason, they didn't even put it on Malware Totem and Forsaken, which is weird, but it's essentially the exact same as just regular zombies on those maps. The only difference is you have to kill the zombies fast, and if you don't kill them fast, you die. It's pretty much as simple as that. There's also more mystery boxes for some reason. Instead of just having like one box on the map at a time, all the boxes are like always available, I believe. So you just go around and you just keep hitting the box as much as you can. And that part of it was kind of interesting, but I don't know. I never really saw the point of playing this other than, okay, maybe it goes by a little bit faster because you're more incentivized to kill zombies faster. But honestly, you could just hop on a regular map, put on the Rampage Inducer, and it'll go by fast anyways. So if you wanted to get through the rounds fast, there's better ways to do it. I personally don't see the point to playing this mode, but it can be fun from time to time. It's not like it's a chore to play or anything, so yeah, this is a decent spot for it. In number 9 spot is going to be Rush from Black Ops 4, and the only reason this is above Cranked is simply because it feels more distinct from the regular mode itself, and also it's actually available on all 8 maps. And I will say Rush does play kind of similarly to Cranked because it has the same pacing where it's like very, very fast paced, but it's got a different purpose to it. So essentially the way Rush works is that you just spawn on the map as usual, and you essentially are told to go to different parts of the map. You are forced to go there though. You don't have really a choice in that, because if you don't, you'll just die. And you have to go to this place on the map and you have to defend it for usually like a minute or something like that. And then once that minute goes by, you now have to go to a different place on the map. And you just keep going from place to place to place pretty much endlessly. I think you can go endlessly for it. It's just I've never gone that far through it because usually like 30 minutes into it, I get kind of bored. It doesn't really get that much harder or anything like that. It's not like regular round-based zombies where it's, getting harder and harder and harder. This mode kind of like has a cap to it where it's really like not that hard to a certain extent. So you just keep doing it. Yeah, you get bored eventually. That's at least how I felt when I was playing it. And for some reason, the pack-a-punch, like you couldn't pack-a-punch your gun all the way. It only lets you do it once. I'm not sure if you have to unlock that at a certain point way later on in the game, but I've played for enough time to the point where I don't think there was any more to it. So it's definitely lacking in features and things that you wanted to do in zombies that you could do on a normal map. But like I said, it's something that if you just want to play simple zombies, you don't really care for Easter eggs and side quests and all that stuff, and you just want to hop in, kill some zombies, and that's it, this mode honestly provides that decently well. Number 8 spot, I've got Onslaught from Cold War. Now, Onslaught had 3 different versions of it. There was just the regular Onslaught, which was on a bunch of the 6v6 maps from Call of Duty multiplayer. You also had Onslaught Elite, which was the exact same as Onslaught, but instead of having a bunch of zombies for each surge, you just had 1 elite per surge, plus a couple, roamers here and there, but it was mainly just based on the elites. And then you had Onslaught Containment, which was on a couple of the gunfight maps instead of these 6v6 maps, and instead of having a giant circle that follows you around the map, you just had the entire map to explore, because of course it was a much smaller map. So I personally enjoyed this mode. I do think it got kind of repetitive, but it was really good for camo grinding and leveling up your guns. So if that's what you wanted to do, if that's all you really cared about, this mode was really fun. It did have a lot of issues throughout its cycle though. Like early on, the loot that you were given after completing a surge just wasn't good enough, and eventually they had to add a bunch of stuff to make it better because there's no boxes, there's no wall weapons. The way you get weapons, perks, and all of that is just from loot. When every time you complete a surge, you are given some loot. And honestly, I enjoy this mode because it kind of plays like you're playing a survival mode within the maps themselves for multiplayer, and I think it just adds a good variety to the game itself. And I would like to see this return in future Call of Duties. I feel like it probably will. Honestly, it should return in Modern Warfare Zombies, if we're going to be honest. It does have that traditional zombies feel to it, except you're not really able to freely explore a larger map. It's just a multiplayer map, and you just go around to wherever the orb wants you to go. Now, of course, if you play Containment, you don't have that restriction, and I do prefer Containment. I think it's a lot faster paced, and like I said, you don't have to deal with, the circle taking you around the map. You just go wherever you want, and I do think it's a good time. Like I said before, though, it gets quite repetitive, so it's not a mode I would play that frequently. Also, this mode was exclusive to PlayStation players for a whole year before it eventually was given to Xbox and PC players, and that has to negatively affect this mode because I didn't play the mode whatsoever during the Cold War's life cycle because of this. I just wasn't able to. I had to wait till Vanguard came out for me to be able to go back and play this because I don't play Call of Duty on the PlayStation. In number 7 spot, I've got Gauntlet from Black Ops 4, and this mode is insanely underrated in my opinion because it's essentially just playing normal zombies. You're playing the exact same maps, playing it normally, but they tell you what to do each round, and if you don't do it by the end of that round, you fail. And it's a mode a lot of people hate because it's hard. Like, it is not easy. Some of them are pretty easy. Some of them are so hard that, yeah, you're probably going to take like 20 tries before actually fully doing it because of how difficult it can be. But that's what I like about it. So there's a maximum of 30 rounds for each of these maps, and they actually have one version of Gauntlet for each map, which is pretty cool. Actually, Voyage of Despair got like a harder version. I think it was a hardcore Gauntlet. I personally never completed it. I never completed any of them except for the 9 Gauntlet, actually. I've done all of them. I tried all of them, but they're pretty difficult. So it's going to take me a lot more attempts to actually fully complete all of the Gauntlets. But for the 9 Gauntlet, it actually ends with the Easter egg boss fight. So it's a pretty cool way of doing the boss fight from 9 without actually having to do the full Easter egg. But I actually really enjoyed it, to be honest. Like I said, it just takes you through the map, and you have to really optimize yourself to make sure you're going to have enough time to do what you need to do before a certain round. Sometimes it'll be just like a challenge round where it's like use only this gun, or, get kills while crouched or something like that. But then sometimes we'll have rounds where it says get the shield by the end of the round. So it's basically telling you like you have to optimize your points and optimize, your time spent in this match to make sure you can get that done before this round. And originally you don't know what the challenge is going to be beforehand until you actually go through the entire thing, and then it reveals it to you. So it actually rewards you for playing the mode again and again and again, because the more you learn what the rounds actually are, the easier it's going to be for you because you're going to be able to properly prepare for it. So it's a mode I think is fun. I just personally never really played it that often just because, yeah, it's not that different than just playing the regular mode. The only difference is, like I said, there's like these guidelines that makes you do certain things by certain rounds. So I think it's a good time. I think it's fun, but it is also very difficult. So I can understand why majority of people are probably not going to be interested in playing it that often. In number 6 spot, I've got Outbreak from Black Ops Cold War. Now, Outbreak did add a couple different versions of it, but every version they've ever added I thought was pretty bad. There was a survival mode they added, which required you to eat food around the map that you loot for health. It was a really stupid mode. I honestly didn't play it more than once. And then they also added Outbreak Collapse, which just kind of played with how the mode was a little bit differently. Instead of you going to different areas, you just instead try to survive on like one area for a certain amount of time. None of these modes were good though. The original version of Outbreak is definitely the best version, so that's the one I'm talking about here. Any of the other versions they did, not really worth talking about. So regular Outbreak essentially just puts you in one of the large Fireteam Cold War maps, and you have to complete a main objective to then go to the next area, and you just keep going from area to area. And there's about like 8 or 9 regions that I think they added by the end of life cycle. So you have a bunch of different places that you're able to explore, but they're just for multiplayer, so they don't really feel that unique or special to zombies. The maps did kind of feel a little soulless, but it was okay because there were a decent amount of little things to do within each area. And I think the Easter eggs really did carry this mode for me, because although they're not the best Easter eggs ever, they at least had 2 Easter eggs that you were able to do, and it made it a little bit more replayable, because every time I would play Outbreak, I would likely choose one of the 2 Easter eggs to do, and it wasn't a terrible time. But trying to actually play just regularly and just going through the motions, it can get really repetitive, and the objectives, they didn't really add that many throughout the life cycle. The side objectives as well, there's only like 3 in each area, so I never really felt like this mode had that much to it that was really enough to consider it something great. It was definitely a lot more fun with friends, just when going on the map and just messing around, and if you get the wonder weapons and stuff, like there's definitely fun moments I've had on Outbreak. But in general, it's not a mode I play that frequently because, quite frankly, I just wasn't that interested in open world zombies compared to the regular maps that you can play. Even in Cold War itself, I would much rather play pretty much any of the other maps in the game. And like I said, the Easter eggs were fine. I enjoyed doing those, especially with the Legion boss fight, which is honestly probably the best boss fight in Cold War. But the mode itself is just not that special. I always thought open world zombies would be really cool, but honestly, the way they implemented it here, it was just, like I didn't really care enough for it. And especially because the maps were just stripped from multiplayer, so they didn't have that soul to it. And it felt like a lot of the areas on these maps were just filler. It was just filler space that you were just had to use to run across, and you had to find a vehicle and just go far because there really wasn't enough stuff on the map to really make certain areas feel worth it. But it was definitely more replayable than some of the other modes I talked about on this list. It's definitely something I think had more promise and more potential, so it's deserving of this spot in my opinion. In number 5 spot, I've got Operation Deadbolt from Modern Warfare Zombies. So this is one that I expect to change over time, because we're probably going to get new maps in this. We're probably going to get Fortune's Keep and Rebirth Island as playable experiences with the same concept. And I personally think it has a lot of potential. I still don't like a lot of it. I've complained a lot about it in my other videos. I think the schematic system is kind of all over the place. I think the way the looting works sometimes is just not very balanced. And obviously I hate the fact that there's no solo mode currently. There's a lot of issues this mode has, but I do think it currently has more to do than Outbreak, just because every time I load in, I do find myself doing something different every game. There are some parts of it that are repetitive. I think some of the objectives, some of the contracts can be kind of repetitive, but when I do play, I sometimes do very different things. I'll either go to the Legacy Fortress, or maybe go to the Dark Ether, or do some of the missions, or try to get the wonder weapons, or go to tier 3 and grind the contracts there. Like there's a couple different options you currently have for what you might want to do on the map. I do think it's kind of built around the grinds right now, though. That's the big thing everyone's playing for. They're playing for the camo grinds. They're playing for the schematic grinds. They're playing to get the highest tier loot possible. That's like the main thing people are playing for. And once they actually get all the schematics and they get everything they need, I do think this mode is going to lack replayability. So I think some of the other modes I talked about before might have a leg up in terms of just core gameplay, but I do think just what's available currently in this mode is quite a lot. So it has to get some credit there. And I do think it has a lot of potential, especially when we get it on the other maps as well. Obviously, if you haven't played it yet and you want to know how this mode works, essentially it's DMZ but with zombies. So you go in, you have 45 minutes to get as much loot as you can by doing contracts and missions, and you just loot stuff, and then you extract whenever you want. You can literally extract 2 minutes into the game, you can extract 40 minutes into the game, whatever you want. And you have 45 minutes until the storm starts closing in, and it makes it a lot harder to survive. You do have an extra 15 minutes after that, but you probably want to leave before that 45 minutes is up, because it is really hard to get out of there once those 15 minutes start going through because of the ether storm, which makes the game a lot harder. It's really not the same as Outbreak. I know a lot of people consider Outbreak and this is like the same type of mode, but the only similarity is it has that open world feel to it, but it's not the same whatsoever. You don't have rounds here. You don't, go through rounds by doing contracts. None of that exists within this mode. It's a completely separate extraction shooter type experience, and I think it has a place in zombies, and I would like to see them continue it going forward. But of course, I've had many complaints about the fact that it feels like it's taking away from what we could be getting for new round-based content, and that obviously has been affecting my enjoyment just a little bit, because I keep thinking about what could be, what could we be getting instead of something like this? Because of course, just like Outbreak, we're not getting new maps out of this. We're not getting completely new, highly detailed areas. We're just getting the Warzone map thrown into zombies. So I definitely have a lot of criticisms there, but it's still a fun mode, and I do recommend people try it out if you haven't already. In number 4 spot, I've got Grief from Black Ops 2, and this is the most puzzling mode to me ever, because I have no idea why they've never returned it. It makes no sense to me, because it is like the perfect idea for a mode. I do think PvP belongs in zombies. I do think there is a place for it in specific modes. It should obviously not be the only thing available in the game, but I do think they have potential to make a lot of fun competitive zombies experiences. And Grief is one of those experiences. It's not like completely PvP because you can't actually kill other players, but you can grief them, which is of course the whole point of the mode itself, where you can melee them and shoot them, and it will stun them a little bit, so it can make it harder for them to survive against the zombies. And also you can activate traps when they go in front of it to kill other players, or you can throw grenades in front of the mystery box when they try to hit it, so like they can't pick up the gun they want to get. There's a lot of fun things you can do to try to grief other players in this mode, and it's a great time. It's the first time in zombies we had up to 8 players in a singular match at once, and it's actually one of the only times where we're able to do that. And it's a 4v4 last man standing type of mode, so basically it just keeps going on, just like a normal match of zombies where there's rounds, and eventually once a full team is knocked out completely, then the other team will win. But of course, you have to actually finish that round. So if they all get knocked down, the other team still has to finish the round to actually win the game. If they end up going down, then it continues on from that round, but everyone gets revived again. So it is a really crazy mode, and I've had a lot of great memories on it. There's actually quite a few maps you can play on it as well. There's Cell Block, there's Farm, Town, Buried, and Nuketown. So there's 5 different maps, which is a lot better than Turn, which only had 2 maps. And you can also just play with 2 people. You don't even need a full team of 4v4. You can just do a 1v1, and it's still a lot of fun. The only issue I've ever had with this mode is that, first of all, there really wasn't an incentive to win, to be honest, unless you were playing against like people you knew. I really didn't care that much to win my games. It was like, okay, it was a little fun, a little exciting, but we don't have like rewards, direct rewards for winning. So what was really the point? I don't know. And also, you had to have at least one other player. You could not play this solo. So that did hurt it a little bit, but obviously you could just jump in public matches and find other players. It wasn't that big of a deal. And even to this day, it's 10 years after the game released, and you can still find full lobbies of Grief, which is pretty crazy. In number 3 spot, I've got Boss Battles from Infinite Warfare, and this one might surprise some people because I feel like a lot of people didn't really care about this mode, but I thought it was one of the coolest things Call of Duty Zombies has ever done. I love doing Easter eggs. I think they're really fun, but I obviously don't always want to do them. Sometimes I just want to try out the boss fight without having to do the full Easter egg. And this mode was the way to do that. There were 6 boss fights available within Infinite Warfare, and Boss Battle allow you to just jump into it with any guns you want, any perks you want, and just try it out. It also gives you a speedrun timer, so you can like test yourself to see how fast you can do all the boss fights. And because I think boss fights are one of the most enjoyable parts of zombies, of course I ate up this mode. I loved jumping in it, trying Mephistopheles or the Spaceland boss or any bosses that are available from it. I just love to just keep doing them again and again, trying out different weapons, seeing, what different variants could be maybe better against certain bosses. It's a great way to practice them as well. So when you actually jump into the main game, you aren't like trying to learn it for the first time while you already just went through a whole Easter egg, because if you fail it, then you have to restart the entire Easter egg. So at least boss battles allow you to just try it out as many times as you can in this separate mode. And also it's great for players who maybe never want to do the Easter eggs, but they just want to see what the boss fights are like. So this is a great way for them to experience it. Personally, for me, I think this is a great mode that they should bring back, but I do think they should like leave it till maybe the Easter egg has been out for a couple weeks, because you don't want people to, just go into the boss fight and have no incentive to actually do the Easter egg itself. You want people to do the Easter egg for the boss fight, or maybe make it so you have to do the Easter egg first to then unlock the boss battle version of that map. That would be really cool. I just think this is a great mode that I played a lot back in Infinite Warfare, just to test out different weapons on the bosses and try to speedrun them as fast as I possibly could. In number 2 spot, I've got Dead Ops Arcade. Now for this spot, I'm just gonna go with all 3 versions of it and just kind of mix it together for this one placement, because it didn't really make sense to separate them, considering each version is just like a better version of the last one. I think they really only get better. And Dead Ops Arcade 1, although it's enjoyable, I think that in and of itself would probably not rank that high. But once we got to Dead Ops Arcade 2, and especially 3, it's one of my favorite zombies experiences of all time. Dead Ops Arcade is without a doubt the most unique separate zombies mode, which is probably what makes it so enjoyable, because it feels like a completely separate game. It doesn't even feel like you're playing Call of Duty Zombies anymore, which is incredible. And there's also different versions, like for example in Dead Ops Arcade 3, there's a whole different mode that allows you to play it in first person all the way through, which actually is the preferred way to play for me personally. I really love the first person mode. It just lets you experience the map in a way that's more familiar, but still has that very different feel to it. And if you don't know what Dead Ops Arcade is, it essentially just has a bunch of different areas that you travel to, and you play it in this very arcade-like bird's eye view sort of way, of course, other than with that mode that you can go in first person. And you just go through each map, each round. There's like 60 something rounds per Dead Ops Arcade, so it takes a long time to get through them though. If you want to actually beat Dead Ops Arcade, it takes a good 4 to 5 hours, which I think is a decent amount of time, but it's also not too much time, so it's doable. It's not like something that's like nearly impossible to do for the average person. But it is really tricky. Like once you get to those later rounds, it's really difficult, and I love that difficulty. And Dead Ops Arcade 3 to me is the best one because of what they did with the Wild. So the Wild was this whole new thing they added, where at a certain point in the game, you can actually go to this separate area that lets you just freely explore a giant map. And it feels like you're playing some like classic arcade game from like the 90s or something. And it's really interesting. There's different boss fights you can come across. There's keys that you can get to open up separate areas. There's also these mini games that they introduced in Dead Ops Arcade 2, which were really, really fun. So I can definitely see this being in of itself like its own game. They could honestly make a full game out of just Dead Ops Arcade content, and I adore it. Like, to be honest, like its inclusion in Cold War made Cold War Zombies so much better. And honestly, I think this is Dead Ops Arcade 3 is the best piece of zombies content since Ancient Evil from Black Ops 4. And in the number 1 spot, you probably knew this was coming. Traditional round-based zombies is of course my favorite mode in zombies. It's just the best way to play. It's obviously 95% of the content we've gotten has been for this mode, and it's the most replayable. It's the one, I love to just jump through all the different maps, doing Easter eggs, high rounds, side quests, different challenges you can do, speed running. There's so many options you have, or you can just casually play just to go in and shoot zombies, and that's it. There's so many different options you have, and because we have so much content for it, obviously it's going to be my favorite. It's also just what the game started with as well. It's the one that they should be putting like 90% of their attention towards. Unfortunately, lately, I feel like they've been putting maybe like 50% of their attention towards it, and the other 50% has been going to a bunch of other modes they've been adding to zombies lately. I love the other modes, as I talked about in this video. There's plenty of other great modes they're doing, but I really think this mode needs more love. It's only had 6 maps in the past 4 years, which is insane, especially when you compare those 6 maps in the last 4 years to 2015 to 2019, where there was over like 25 maps that we've gotten within that time period. So definitely feel like we're lacking some round-based content here, but I love it. It's obviously gonna be my favorite thing in zombies, probably till the end of time. I don't think they're ever gonna introduce a new mode that ends up being even better than this. I'm not saying it's impossible, I'm saying it's just very unlikely. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Give me your lists for your favorite and least favorite zombies modes. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.